Hi, welcome to The Pursuit of Truth. So I heard this thing on Sky News and it was really, really interesting. I'm just going to play it because I just want you to hear it because I don't think I can add anything better to it. And it was a really interesting, what she talked about, how history is taught in this country. It was all to do with a survey to do with being proud and being black, and a bit of black and British. And you know, the only thing is I would say with that survey is if you did that to white people as well, they probably wouldn't be that proud either. I guess like historically this country and proud that we're not like America in that sense. And I suppose there's a lot of things not to be proud about in our history, you know, to do with what she talks about with the empire and all that kind of stuff. So it's really interesting what she said and how it can, history, you have to be careful with how you teach it and how it can shape and reinforce things. And I didn't really think about this like this, so I wanted to put it out there and so you could hear it and see what you think. And I'll play it now.
2021 and March of 2022 in research that covered topics like Britishness, work and education. Now, people were asked if they were proud to be British, with 49% indicating they were definitely or somewhat proud to be British. 45% said they were not really or not at all proud, with the remaining 6% saying they didn't know or just not answering. In terms of work, 98% of respondents said they at least sometimes have to compromise who they are and how they express themselves to fit in. And in education, 80% of those polled believe racial discrimination was at least somewhat a barrier to academic attainment of young black people. Let's get some more on this. I'm joined by Iman Ayton, an anti-racism activist and social commentator. Iman, it's really good to have you in studio.
Thanks for having me.
What did you think when you saw the stats come out of this survey?
So I thought it was quite truthful, in all fairness. I had to think about where I placed myself as someone who was born here. I did. So I placed myself in the category of someone who is somewhat British. So I was born here. My grandparents came here on the Windrush in the 1950s as Commonwealth citizens with the right of abode. So, of course, I have to take into consideration the historical context. But it's also the same historical context where I have an issue, right? So we've got the issue of racism transitioning to slavery and then colonialism. And then, of course, the Commonwealth, which is just a disguise for asserting dominance in the West, but that's another conversation. And then we have more racism. So we've got the whole package of racism, which I have an issue with. We also have the British education system.
Yes.
This is an issue for me. Please go ahead.
No, that's mentioned in the survey, isn't it? About the sort of the percentage of people who feel like the education system is not doing them justice and not perhaps teaching a curriculum that's representative enough.
So personally, let's just get down to facts, right? The British education system in regards to history, it starts with Black history, African history from the 15th and 16th century, where Black people, African people were enslaved and white people like lovely William Wilberforce came along and saved the day. So this does three things, ironically. Firstly, it tells the subconscious minds of Black people that they are inferior and that they're only known as slaves. Secondly, it tells the subconscious minds of white people that they are superior and saviors, because of course they ended, right? We know what they ended on. I'm not even going to give you too much credit on that one, I'll be honest. And then, of course, last but not least, it ensures that Black people continue to see white people as their oppressors, in spite of the fact that there were many that preceded white supremacy. So this is the issue for me. And then, of course, we have, last but not least, I have to add this, Suella Braverman's statement about immigration being the threat to the West. Hold on a second. Let me not even do a rant right now, but that's the added thing.
I was going to come on to that. I mean, the thing about this survey that I think jumped out to me is the word proud is doing a lot of damage. People identify as British, but it's that pride in Britishness. And I suppose a lot of that leans into what you were saying about what they're taught about themselves and how they figure into British society.
Exactly, because there seems to be a very kind of one-sided history that is presented to us all, which is black people were slaves, white people saved us. It's really as simple as that, whereas Africa has 4,000 years of history prior, devoid of Western influence. That is completely and utterly negated. And then we just focus on all of the things in terms of the aforementioned points. So this is why it affects self-esteem, it affects how black people feel in terms of kind of this pride. And so, of course, I will always agree with the fact that people have the right to subscribe to being called or categorizing themselves as Black British. But for me personally, I always go back to my roots. I am born here, so therefore I am somewhat British.
Okay.
But I am Black African and I am Black Jamaican, Nigerian and Jamaican.
Excellent. Jamaican heritage myself.
Okay.
Now, I mean, one of the issues as well that comes out of this is the struggle for identity, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the sort of the difficulty that people like yourself and myself find when they're in these situations. And do you think it reflects enough how people from those communities struggle with the identity that perhaps other people don't quite appreciate how
Yes.
difficult it is where you place yourself?
Yes, of course. My last name is Ayton. That was not my African name. Ayton, as far as I'm aware, we're still struggling in terms of our family trying to figure this out because, as you know, it's very convoluted. But in terms of our ancestry, as far as I am aware, the name Ayton is a slave owner name. I'm pretty sure it's Scottish. So it was a Scottish man who basically, let's be honest, raped a black woman 400 years ago. And 400 years later, I'm walking around as Aman Ayton, the anti-racism activist with the slave owner name. So this is why my identity... Thank you. This is why many black people are confused, compounded by the fact that British history, the British education system in regards to history starts with slavery. So a lot of us are walking around not knowing who we are, having to deal with low self-esteem due to the fact that we are only told that we are slaves. And then, of course, we have the current Conservative government talking about multiculturalism has failed. And, of course, it is a threat in terms of immigration and the West. So all of these things...
Because we haven't got loads of time, but
I know, sorry.
That's a really important point. Is there a part of your thinking that would support the idea that multiculturalism failed? What was the idea of multiculturalism? Do you know, what is she trying to say there when she's in a position of power that multiculturalism has failed, is that she feels like people have been siloed into different communities? Is there a part of that where you can see where she has a point and perhaps we need to rethink the way that we structure and the way that we work as a society of people?
No, I think that statement fuels the culture wars, which is the current thing that is ultimately galvanizing support for the Conservative Party. That is where that statement lies. She contradicts herself. She is an immigrant, a family immigrant. She contradicts herself. So we don't even need to go into the hypocrisy in that statement. What I will say is that I appreciate there is an issue with immigration, and so she has to stand with or lead with somewhat of a pragmatic stance. But you cannot negate the fact that immigrants have helped build this country. You cannot negate the fact that me and you are here having a discussion about all the wonderful things and terrible things that are going on in this country. We cannot negate these facts. So to say that it has failed, for me personally, that's just rhetoric that basically leads with culture wars. But I understand where she's coming from in terms of that pragmatism and trying to lead with figuring out the immigration crisis. But there is no crisis because reality is they're failing on every level. They need to deal with that and then get to the issue of immigration worldwide.
Instrumental in leading some of the Black Lives Matter protests a number of years ago. When you look at that movement and look at where we are now, how do you reflect on what may have changed over those past few years?
Two things. So consciousness, which seems to be an ongoing, so the kind of level of consciousness has changed throughout the years from the 1950s, 60s, 70s, etc. to now. And then, of course, I personally believe we have transitioned from overt racism to covert racism. So obvious, deliberate incidences of racial prejudice, where it's obvious, deliberate and direct. And now we're kind of doing this subtle thing. Most people actually regard England as being quite superior in regards to covert
racism. Subtlety has increased in the past couple of years.
Of course. But I'm actually going to say that we've now started to transition back to overt racism due to the culture wars and due to Suella Braverman's statements and due to many other various things that what the Conservative Party have done. So ironically, we've gained in terms of consciousness, and the more we gain our level of consciousness is the more we get this terrible pushback, so the more challenges we get as a result. And then, of course, we get this interesting dynamic of people ultimately being alive to this consciousness, which we call woke, and then we have people weaponizing said consciousness. So we're now delving back into where we were like back in the 1960s. We're kind of heading in that trajectory.
Okay.
But yeah, I'll end it there.
I think we managed to get through a lot in only a few minutes' time. But thank you very much, Iman. Thank you for coming in. And we're going. All right. Thank you very much for that. All right. Let me.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. There was another thing I wanted to bring you that sort of goes off from the back of that. It was on the Political Hub.
I'm talking, of course.
Do I have the actual place where it was? They were talking about fairness. Where was it? I don't know if I'll be able to find the actual spot now. But it just made me laugh how they were trying to make out that this country was fair. Yeah, they were talking about Rishi Sunak and HS2 and how he's, they were trying to get a decision out of him. They couldn't get a decision out of this person. And they were trying to say that, oh yeah, he's taking a long time. He's looking at all the evidence and this, that and the other. And she's asked about it. And she says the same kind of thing that, she can't answer because I think was it Transport? I can't remember who she was. And then she says about, this country is known for its fairness. And I thought, well, where's the evidence for that? It just goes into really what the last lady was talking about, this idea of painting ourselves as the white hats, as it were. I don't know if it was this. It was to do with HS2. Oh yeah, it was this lady here. Yeah, it just made me, because
got a lot to deal with.
We're not really that fair, are we? Let's be honest. There's a lot of our history, evidence for our history of, we're just normal human beings and we're not more fair than anyone else. Maybe in certain things we are, but it just made me laugh at how we paint ourselves. I think it's somewhere here.
Again, that's commentary on an announcement that hasn't actually been made. It would be helpful, wouldn't it, though, if you could just say what's going on? I don't understand. Why hasn't he... I mean, it's leaking out all over the place. I genuinely, it looks a bit chaotic. Why don't you just tell us what's happening?
Well, the Prime Minister answered this direct himself today, didn't he? So he said, look, he's the one that's making the decision at the end of the day.
He's made the decision,
but he wants to... No, he said that he wouldn't be rushed on the decision. I think that was his exact quote, because he wants to ensure that he gets it right. And surely that's what we want from a Prime Minister. We want somebody that's going to review the evidence, review the facts, and make the right decisions.
What's your own view?
Was my view. Well, I'm not privy to all of that evidence. The way that I do politics in my own department is I try and base it on the evidence myself. So if I was the Prime Minister, I'd be doing exactly what he's doing. I'd be asking a lot of questions and looking at exactly what is in the best interests of the British public and the British taxpayer.
Okay, let's talk about something that has happened. Suella Braverman, speech today, Home Secretary, she warned of a hurricane of mass migration. I mean, she's previously talked to swarms of people. Are you comfortable with that language?
I think that every time I knock on a door in my constituency, very, very often, this topic of illegal immigration is coming up. It's one of the top priorities of the British public. I'm not in a red wall seat, and yet it's coming up again and again because people are saying, look, they want it dealt with. It's not fair. And I think fairness is in our DNA, isn't it? We are happy to help those who desperately need help, absolutely. But we shouldn't be happy to help those that try and cheat and abuse the system.
At the same time, though, and look,
you see, that's fairness is in our DNA. Whoa. And actually what she's talking about, knocking on people's doors and getting racist remarks about, we don't want the immigrants, which is what the Tories are talking about there. That harkens back to what the lady was saying previously. We were going back to the 60s. It's overt, not covert, racism now. Oops, the balloon just burst. Twins' birthday today. Sorry about that. But yeah, this idea of DNA, our fairness is in our DNA. When you look at our history, come on. Anyway, I guess those two, went together, and like an example and some evidence of that. If only we lived in a world where we didn't live in borders and we could love each other as human beings as we should. We should be helping each other out. We shouldn't be worrying about these things. We should be building countries the same so everyone has the infrastructure and doesn't need to go or go if they want to. We shouldn't need pieces of paper because everything was freely given. We found it all free. It's we, the previous people, previous humans, that have possessed it and cut it up and said, this is mine and this is yours, and I'm going to be above you and you're going to be lower than me. And we keep that. We box ourselves into different boxes where we're all actually the same. We're all human beings and we all have one existence. Why would we choose it this way where, we're all apart from each other, not wanting to help each other unless there's money involved, I don't know. Anyway, I thought those were both interesting. They seem to tie into each other as, proof of what the first speaker was saying. All right, leave your comments and share, etc., whatever. Take care, easy, God bless, and peace.